Jesse's got it. Here he comes. Way back to me. It is Cleveland slam dunk. And the doctor made a sensational play. Fire in front. The front to the score! And Giroux's got it. Weston fires. Weston goal! Brady back again. He steps up his head and falls forward. And he fumbles the football and the Eagles have it.
We welcome you to the Philly Sports Hour here on March 9th. A very busy week in Philly sports, an emotional one, a trade deadline, a retirement, lots going on. So welcome in. Thank you for tuning in on this Saturday morning. We're going to have Adam Kimelman from NHL.com join in a little later when we start talking about the Flyers. But we're going to start off with a team that may have had the busiest week that just had some news come out as well, and that is the Eagles, who started with a Jason Kelce retirement. I'm going to show you a quick video that was posted on Philly Sports Reports earlier this week.
So this all brings us here to today, where I announce that I am retiring. With the Philadelphia Eagles. And today, I must admit, I am officially overrated. Vastly overrated. But fuck, it took a lot of hard work and determination getting here. I have been the underdog my entire career, and I mean this when I say it. I wish I still was. Few things gave me more joy than proving someone wrong. My mother used to tell people, and still says to this day, if you want Jason to do something, all you have to do is tell him he can't. And that was true in more ways than I care to admit. I relish doubters. They fueled a fire within. I suspect that comes from an upbringing where my parents would tell me, Jason, you can be anything in this world you want to, as long as you put your mind to it and work hard to achieve it. So whenever I was faced with doubt in my career, be it from fans, from coaches, even from my own teammates, the American dream would burn from deep inside my bones. Which leads to my last Jeff Stoutland quote. Hungry dogs run fast. Thank you, Philadelphia. Thank you, Philadelphia. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for letting me represent this city and allowing me into your homes every Sunday. Growing up, it has truly been a privilege. You have all been so good to me and my family. Growing up in Cleveland, I watched all of my favorite athletes leave the city. Hell, a whole team left the city. It has always been a goal of mine to play my whole career in one city. And I couldn't have dreamt a better one and a better fit if I tried. I don't know what's next, but I look forward to the new challenges and opportunities that await. And I know that I carry with me the lessons from my time here. And that forever. And that forever we shall all share the bond of being Philadelphians. That's all I got.
So there you go. The video that was posted on Philly Sports Reports earlier this week. You can go check that out over on all of our social media platforms. I think some of them aren't up anymore, but you can go check it out. Definitely on YouTube. You can go check that out. So yeah, the Jason Kelsey retiring, of course, a lot of it was expected. Kind of throughout the offseason. You saw him crying in Tampa on the last game, the playoff game, and just kind of expected all the moves to happen. And it was finally announced earlier this week. Really touching and emotional press conference that was about 45 minutes. I believe it was Monday or Tuesday. I can't remember the exact day. And it hit me hard. I mean, Kelsey's my favorite athlete ever. And grew up with him. And I mean, it was sad to see my favorite athlete go, but we'll see what the future holds for Kelsey and what the future holds for the Eagles, because with losing a guy like him in that locker room is really going to hurt. It's going to leave a big mark in this team, a big rip and tear. But one guy that could be returning next year is Brandon Graham, as he and the Eagles are reportedly working on a one-year deal to return for his final season in the NFL. It'll be his farewell tour next year, as the Eagles could be losing Kelsey and Fletcher Cox this year. BG is willing to go one more. So that was reported by Derek Gunn. Hopefully that happens. The Eagles losing these three guys will really hurt them. And if they can at least retain one for next season, and BG can be the leader of this team vocally, and I mean, I don't know exactly what his role will be. He was still one of the best defenders on that line last year. So bringing him back could really help, and it will. And for his farewell tour, it would be awesome for him also to play his whole career in Philadelphia. We move on to what could be the future of the Philadelphia Eagles and Saquon Barkley, as the Eagles and Saquon have mutual interest. Barkley was not franchise tagged earlier this week by the Giants, so he will become a free agent. Excuse me. And he and the Eagles have mutual interest in bringing him to Philadelphia. He's from Pennsylvania. He went to Penn State. It makes too much sense for it to happen, but does it? He's so injury prone. I don't know if he's going to like the money that the Eagles will offer him. The Eagles have never really paid a running back a lot of money. So we'll see what comes by with that. And the Eagles want a running back who can catch the ball. And in my opinion, if you can use DeAndre Swift correctly, you can use him as a guy that can catch the ball, and he can be just as effective as Saquon. But we didn't see that last year. The Eagles did not effectively use their running backs. Hopefully, Kellen Moore will be able to fix that problem this season, but we will see. I don't know if Saquon's going to come here. I don't know if they can re-sign DeAndre Swift with these rumors that are going around. But now that came out today with Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick being possibly on the chopping block, as the Eagles have received trade calls on Sweat and are accepting the calls, and the Eagles are shopping Sweat and Hassan Reddick. They're looking to aggressively pursue Bryce Huff. Bryce Huff would be great, but you're losing two good guys, two of your best defenders from the last two seasons. Josh Sweat, who kind of had a down year last year, but so did the whole team. Hassan Reddick, who has been one of the most effective guys on this defense the last couple of seasons, a guy who's from Philadelphia or from Pennsylvania, went to Temple. I mean, the fact from what I'm seeing from the Eagles shopping these two guys is possibly a retool. It doesn't look like this team is ready to win a championship yet with the moves that are coming out that could be happening. You see the Sweat and Reddick possibly getting moved, and I mean the Saquon thing wouldn't look like a retool, but if you're trading away two of your best defenders, and that's not a good sign for what you have coming up this season. Sweat and Reddick being two of the best defenders the last two seasons. I don't know exactly how to feel about that news that just broke. So we'll see what happens with that. I can't tell you what's going to happen. We know Reddick reportedly came out earlier that he asked for a trade, asked to get out of the city, and he then turned that down. So I don't know. Maybe the Eagles just came out with that as an excuse that they're going to trade him, and we'll see we'll see what happens. I can see the Reddick trade happening. Josh Sweat, I can see a lot of teams wanting Josh Sweat, but hopefully for the Eagles' sake, it doesn't happen. Let's move on to the 76ers, who are losing games and blowing leads. They were out all week without Tyrese Maxey, who had a mild concussion. He slipped and banged his head into a Dallas Mavericks knee, and it was a really scary moment. He was able to come back in that game where the Sixers got a huge win, 120-116 in Dallas on Sunday, a great win. Except for the rest of the week, they were not able to retain that as they were without Maxey and, of course, Joel Embiid all week. Next game, they were up big on the Nets in Brooklyn and then collapsed to lose 112-107. That was a bad one. Blew that lead, but then the next game, it got even worse as they blew a 15-point lead to the 25-win Memphis Grizzlies at the Wells Fargo Center, and they ended up losing 115-109. And then last night, they scored 34 points at halftime to the New Orleans Pelicans. Came back a little bit in the second half and only lost 103-95, but still down by 32 points at halftime, scored 34 points at the half, and really 3 horrible games by the Sixers this week, and they really just do not look like anything. They've dropped down into the play-in this week, and they sure look like a play-in team. I mean, I think I'd rather be a play-in team and lose in the play-in than get killed by the Celtics in the first round. So really bad basketball by the Sixers. And who is the problem? I mean, it's definitely a little bit of everybody. Nick Nurse isn't stepping up when he needs to as the head coach and filling in for his guys that are absent. And you also have, Tobias Harris. Holy, so many missed shots and just horrible basketball all week. He was a little better last night, but he got a little hot, had a couple 20-point games, looked like he was coming back to his form that he was when the Sixers first brought him in, and he referred back to Tobias Harris. I mean, in that Nets game, multiple missed layups, easy lays to lose, and Memphis, I think he had 6 points through 3 quarters, and just Tobias, a guy who was a max player. They gave him the max deal a few years ago, and now he is playing like he should be in the G League. Tobias Harris is a big problem with this team, and he might be the main problem. He might not be the source of the problem, but he sure is a big problem. And the Sixers have to stick with him. He's got 1 more year left on his deal, and this is going to be a problem for the rest of the season. And with Tyrese Maxey should be returning sometime next week, I believe tomorrow in their game. And man, it's a tough going with the Sixers right now. They should, hopefully they can still be in the postseason. They're good. We'll see if when Joel comes back, but he might be back by playoff time. He could be back by the end of this week. So yeah, we'll see what goes on with the Sixers. It's a bad situation over there right now. But what's not a bad situation is the money you can save on SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the easiest and most efficient way to buy your tickets. Each seat is given a green, red, or yellow dot, indicating whether purchasing that ticket would be a good, bad, or fair deal. And there's a lot of sporting events going on. Phillies, regular season starting this month. Flyers pushing for a playoff spot. They got some big games coming up. Sixers fighting for a playoff spot as well at this point, with Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid hopefully returning soon. Union are getting into the middle of their season. Lots going on. Lots of concerts coming in, comedy shows. WWE's coming to Philadelphia super soon. So a lot going on. So make sure you go to use SeatGeek. And if you use code Philly Sports Report, you can save $20 off your first SeatGeek order. Again, PHILLYSPORTSREPORT to save $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Click the link in the description or bio to save $20. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring this stream. Let's move on to the Philadelphia Phillies, who had a good week as they extended Zach Wheeler to a 3-year, $126 million deal. That's an AAV of $42 million. He's the highest average annual value for a Phillies player ever. It's the 4th highest ever for a starting pitcher. And, he absolutely deserves it. He's been so good for this team. He's been even better in the postseason. And that 5-year, $118 million contract prior to the 2020 season is starting to look like an absolute steal, as Wheeler has gone 43-25 with a 3.06 ERA and 101 regular season starts. In the postseason, he has been one of the most effective pitchers in baseball history with a 2.42 ERA and a .73 whip in 11 games, including 10 starts. His whip and opponent's on-base percentage are both the lowest ever for a pitcher in postseason history. I mean, Wheeler has been one of the best pitchers in playoff history, and it has been with the Philadelphia Phillies. So you don't see the Phillies on the right side of history many times, but you're seeing it here with Wheeler, and he gets a bag, and he deserves it. 3 years, not a super long time, but that'll last for the rest of his prime, and that's really when the Phillies need him. That World Series window, and it's good to lock. It's even better to lock him up for those 3 years because that's kind of the window for the Phillies World Series. The Phillies World Series window is closing. These guys are aging. These guys are in their primes right now, and they need to win right now. And signing Wheeler for the next 3 years is massive. So good for the Phillies to lock Wheeler up, and they got their two priorities done this off season. They've re-signed Wheeler, they have re-signed Nola, and they are good, locked up for the rest of their career. Nola for the rest of his career. Wheeler, will see how much if he has any other years after his 3 years here in Philadelphia. But great for the Phillies, and this offseason is officially a success for the Phillies. And what is also a success is the 10% you can save on FOCO. Real fans need the best gear. That's why FOCO makes legendary gear for the most legendary fans. Click on the link in the description or bio to save 10% on any order. You can click that link in the description or the bio. Thank you to FOCO for sponsoring. And now we are ready to bring in Adam Kimelman from NHL.com. Adam, welcome. How are we doing today?
We're a little bit busy. We're a little bit less busy than we were the last 48 hours or so. So it's nice to kind of come on, decompress a little bit after, some very stressful last couple of days getting up to the NHL trade deadline on Friday.
Yeah, a lot going on with the Flyers, and it got started early with a big Sean Walker trade 2 days before the deadline, where they traded Walker and a 2026 fifth-rounder to Colorado for Ryan Johansson and a conditional 2025 first-rounder. Big trade for the Flyers, and definitely the biggest one of the week. What was everything going on with that trade, and how big was Walker for this team as well?
Well, I think you can look at where Walker and Nick Seeler were as the only defense pair that stayed pretty much steady from game one to where we are now. So that says a lot about what he brought to the team, what the coaching staff thought of him. He was a really good player, but I think the writing was on the wall when the Flyers got Jamie Drysdale that, suddenly you've got 7D and somebody, you can play 7, but it's not really a long-term solution. Certainly not something the coaching staff wanted. So you knew at some point Sean Walker, last year of his deal, whether he was going to be a part of what they're building here for the future. It certainly never seemed like it because of his age and where he would fit sort of in their building process, that a move was going to happen with him at some point. You just didn't know when. And it just so happened that, the deadline creates a little bit of an extra pressure. So it got to the point where Colorado wanted to do something where they need to bring in a center, and they had the feeling it was going to cost them one of their defensemen. So going out, getting Sean Walker allowed them to trade Bowen Byram to Buffalo so they could bring in Casey Middlestat to be that second-line center they're looking for. So it's interesting how all the sort of dominoes fall into place there for Sean Walker to end up with the Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah, and Walker, huge for this team, as you said. And you mentioned Nick Seeler, who is getting a big contract extension, 4 years, $2.7 million AAV. How important is it for the Flyers to lock up their glue guy and Sealer for the next 4 seasons?
Well, I think, truth be told, I think 4 seasons might be a shade longer than maybe the Flyers wanted to go, but it also allowed them to cut down that average annual value and save a little bit money against the salary cap. But I think on the ice, what Sealer brings, it's very difficult. He plays a style that is very challenging for guys to play, where he will block shots and he will take the hacks and the whacks, and play hard minutes against other teams' top players. It is a physical, rough style. And you see it now where, I'm not sure if he still is, but he was leading the league in block shots when he went out of the lineup. It's a rough way to play, but it's an important way to play. And his work ethic, the way he sort of brought himself up from basically being out of hockey 3 years ago to where he is now with a 4-year contract. He's not a guy who's going to rest on his laurels. He's a guy that as you bring more younger players into the organization, into the big club, you want them around people like Nick Seeler to learn this is what it means to be a Flyer. This is what it means to play in the NHL. These are the things you have to do to be a professional. They see that in Seeler. They want him around the guys as much for how he is off the ice and who he is as much as for what he does on the ice.
There was a lot of chatter throughout the last couple, the last couple weeks of Walker or one of the two, Walker or Seeler, getting traded, and then which one was going to get traded, which one was going to get an extension, or were they going to package the two? Was this always the plan with Walker getting traded and Seeler getting the extension? Or was this something that was made up just on Wednesday that they rolled with?
No, I think, in listening to Danny Briere talk, they were making efforts to sign both guys and to keep both guys because they understand how well those guys have played together as a pair. And look, the Flyers might not be where they are in the standings were it not for the way Sean Walker and Nick Seeler played together. But reality is what reality is. Both guys are free agents. And the Flyers really, they are a playoff team, but they're not a Stanley Cup contending team. And you wonder where they're going to hit that Stanley Cup contending spot, where it's maybe 3 or 4 years from now as they continue to accumulate young talent. Nick Seeler and Sean Walker might or might not be part of that, where that window is. So you have to make that decision, not just for what they're bringing you this season, but you look 3-4 years down the line. So they ideally would have liked to have kept both guys. The money worked a little bit better for Seeler than it did for Walker. And they also have guys like Ronnie Attard and guys like Helge Grans who are ready to make an impact on the NHL roster, they hope. And they really don't want them blocked by an older player who, when those guys are ready, you might not be able to move because maybe teams don't want him because of whatever contract you sign him that looks good today might not look good 2 years from now.
Let's look at Ryan Johansson, the Flyers traded for. The Flyers priced him on waivers, and he cleared waivers. Does he have any look in the future? Is there any chance he's part of the future of the Flyers, or will he not put a sweater on?
It doesn't seem like he's going to be part of whatever the Flyers look like moving forward here. Placing him on waivers the same day they got the trade. Danny Briere was very public in saying that they don't see him as a fit. They don't see a place for him on the NHL team. They tried desperately to move him yesterday before the deadline, found no takers. They have told him to report to Lehigh Valley. Whether he plays for them or not, we'll see. It sounds like if things continue on the path they're on right now, they will look to buy him out in the summer if they can't move him at a certain point when he'll be in the last year of his contract. I'm not sure what the end game is there with Ryan Johansson. I have to say I'm a little biased. He is one of my favorite people. I've covered him going back to when he was playing his junior hockey with the Portland Winterhawks in the Western Hockey League. I've known him all throughout his NHL career. He and John Tortorella had a difficult relationship when they were together in Columbus. It wasn't long after Torts got there that Johansson was traded to Nashville. But he's an older player now. Maybe he's a more mature player. It doesn't sound like the Flyers even want to go down that road with Johansson where, rebuilding the culture in that locker room was sort of their number one job. And nothing against the guys that were moved out during the summer, Kevin Hayes and Ivan Provorov and James Van Riemsdyk, but they were not part of what the Flyers felt they needed to be or should be moving forward. And maybe they saw Ryan Johansson sort of part of that, having part of that mindset. And they didn't even want to infiltrate the locker room because they like what they have, the culture they have. And this goes back to some of the things we talked about with Nick Seeler. They didn't want that coming into the locker room. So in their minds, root out the problem before it even starts. Ryan Johansson not going to play for the Flyers. Obviously, things could change if there's a rash of injuries and look, you've got a 6'5" centerman who has been a 30-goal scorer in the NHL, who has played in the Stanley Cup final. It certainly doesn't hurt, but it doesn't sound like, if things continue on the path they're on, that we'll see Ryan Johansson put on a Philadelphia Flyers jersey.
And it's smart to avoid any situations with him and Torts. And I mean, I guess it does make sense for everything to go on with Johansson. Let's look at the second trade. The first trade the Flyers made on Friday, the second trade they made up to the deadline, and that was Wade Allison, who was traded to Nashville for forward Denis Gurriel. Allison kind of set back a lot with the injuries, needed a change, and a change he got, Adam.
Well, yeah, and I think it's something that he needed. Obviously, he had a shot in the NHL last season. He didn't get the playing time that maybe he thought or the team thought he would earn or wanted to see him earn. We came to training camp. Danny Briere talked about this yesterday. We had Wade Allison penciled onto our NHL roster coming into training camp, but then, his camp was okay, but Bobby Brink passed him, Tyson Forrester passed him, and, when they came down to setting that final roster to start the season, Wade Allison's name had fallen off the list. He went down to Lehigh, and right off the bat, it did not go well for him at the start in Lehigh. Obviously, he was frustrated. He's been through a lot. You mentioned the injuries. He thought he had done enough to prove himself as an NHL player. Clearly, Flyers management did not think so. So there were some, I don't think attitude issues are the right word to use. I think he had to change his mindset, and I don't know if he ever got there where he was able to put in the work to earn an opportunity to come back. Bobby Brink got sent down a few weeks ago. Maybe that could have been the opportunity for him. They went with Ollie Lixell instead, and that had to be another point of frustration for Allison. So giving him a shot with another organization certainly should help him. It'll give him, maybe it lights a fire under him, gets him going in the direction that he can go. Because when Wade Allison is going, there's not a lot of a drop off from the raw talent that Owen Tippett has to the raw talent that Wade Allison has. But with Allison, it's the work ethic, and he's got to stay healthy. That's been the biggest thing for him. He had the horrible knee injury when he was in college. He's had a few bumps and bruises along the way that have kept him out of the lineup. But if he can stay healthy, get himself in the right shape, get himself in the right mindset, this opportunity in Nashville could be huge for him. Similar to what the opportunity in Philadelphia is going to be for Gurianov. He's a guy, number 12 pick in the draft a few years ago, had a great playoff run with the Dallas Stars back in 2020 when they were in the COVID bubble. Helped them get to the Stanley Cup final. Hasn't gone as well the last couple of years for Gurianov, but the raw skill certainly is there. And he's a guy who 6'3", 205-pound wingers don't grow on trees. You find one, you hope maybe you can get him working the right way, going the right way. This could be a huge asset for the Flyers down the road if Denny Gurianov can get back to being the player he was his first couple of years in Dallas.
Hopefully he can. And the second trade that was made right up at the deadline was Eric Johnson, who was traded here from Buffalo for a 2024 fourth-round pick. What could the Flyers expect from Eric Johnson?
Well, I think what you're getting is a veteran defenseman. He's won a Stanley Cup. He's been to the playoffs. He's a right-shot defenseman who knows how to play the game. He can play either side of the ice. He's going to fill in a lot for them with what they've lost with Rasmus Ristolainen being out, Jamie Drysdale being out, with Nick Seeler being out. They needed a little more experience on the back end. If you look at their schedule, 8 of their next 9 are against playoff teams ahead of them in the standings. They still have to play Florida again. They have to play Toronto twice. They have to play Boston twice. They still have to play the Rangers. You really don't want to go into those caliber games with Ronnie Attard and Adam Ginning on your back, the back of your defense core, and Igor Zamula, who really only has a year and a half of pro experience. You need a little bit more veteran help there. So that's what Eric Johnson will provide them. You can only play Cam York and Travis Sanheim so many minutes in a game. You need a little bit more experience back there. And he's a right shot, which they really needed. So I think Eric Johnson has a chance to really help this team in a big way. He's going to fit seamlessly into the locker room. And that Stanley Cup ring he's wearing is going to carry a lot of weight for a team that, most of these guys have never been to the playoffs.
Yeah, they got 2 guys with experience in the postseason. This trade deadline, just how much does that mean for this team right now? As you said, most of them have no playoff experience.
Well, playing important games this time of year is going to be huge for their development, whether they get in or not. Being involved in these tight, tense, these are already playoff atmosphere games. You saw, the other night when they were in Florida, it's a 2-1 game that they win in the final minute of regulation. That's a huge moment for that group that they were, they survived playing the best team in the league in their building and gutted out a 1-goal victory. Those are the kind of games that they're going to face if they're able to make the playoffs. So being able to be comfortable and be confident to win those kind of games, that's huge experience for them now, and it's something they're going to take with them 2, 3, 4 years down the road. Guys like Brink, guys like Forrester, even a guy like Joel Farabee, who's never been to the playoffs. That's a huge moment for those guys in their development to be part of that game and be part of what they're going to go through here as we go into, the rest of March and into April.
So those are the moves that the Flyers made at the deadline. A move that they didn't make that we were talking a little bit about right before we got on was a backup goaltender. Flyers right now are riding with Urson and Sandstrom as they placed Cal Peterson no longer on the NHL roster. What do you think happened with the backup goalie? Do you think they made an attempt at one? And how confident are the Flyers with Sandstrom as the backup goalie for the rest of the season?
Well, clearly they made the determination that what was out there and what was available on the market wasn't worth what the ask was, or they didn't feel it was an upgrade on what Felix Sandstrom could potentially give to them. And, John Tortorella has gone out and he said they really only identified about 3 or 4 spots where they would need a backup goalie to start. I don't know if I agree with him, but that's their mindset. So do you spend the assets to bring in a guy from the outside when he's only going to play maybe 3 or 4 games? Now, the flip side of that is you're rolling with Sam Urson, who's already played a lot of games. You've seen small cracks in his game where there are areas that he needs to be better at, whether it's overcommitting on plays at the post, whether it's, getting a little bit out of position sometimes, coming off his angle a bit, that you'd wonder, is it teams finding a book on him, or is he just a little bit worn out mentally and physically just from all the games that he's played and the way the games have piled up here? February was very busy for them. It's a difficult time for a goalie who's gone through it. You're looking at a goalie now. He's still a rookie. This is his first kick at it. These are intense games. And look, Sam Urson has shown he is a very mentally tough guy. Very little phases him, but you can't know what it's like until you go through it. And he's going through it right now. And you don't want to rub the guy to the nub before you even get to the playoffs. So maybe they get a more experienced backup. Maybe Torts is a little bit more willing to play him a little bit more often. I think there is a certain trust level with Felix Sandstrom that still needs to be reached with this coach. You saw it last year. I think 9 of his 18 starts came in the second game of back-to-backs. I don't know if he was really given a fair shake. We'll see what happens here moving forward, but clearly they're committed to Sam Urson as the number one guy, and they're going to hope for the best when it comes to Felix Sandstrom. And if something goes sideways, they're going to hope Cal Peterson's able to figure out what ails him back in the American League. And, those are the 3 goalies they're going to go, forward here with and hopefully into the postseason with.
Hopefully. I've liked Urson's been great stepping in for this team. All the things that happened with Carter Hart, and for him to fill in almost flawlessly and get these great wins for the Flyers, he's been huge for this team.
Yeah, he's been, the Carter Hart thing kind of, nobody expected it to happen when it happened, but it is what it is, and now they have to move forward. They have no choice. So Sam Urson becomes the guy, and they are committed to, in Philadelphia, not spending major assets at this point because they don't think they're at where they're going to be to rush along the process and go out and get a veteran, experienced goaltender, because it wouldn't. They view it as penny wise and pound foolish, where you're spending assets now when you're not at that point to spend those assets to get what you want out of them. That's for 3 and 4 years down the line. So that's why where they are now is a bonus. So if they get in, that's great. And if they don't get in, they value the experience that they're gaining from going through this process much more than they do, anything else. So, they're very comfortable going with Sam Urson, and we'll see where we go moving forward with it. But for the rest of this season, it's Urson. He's their guy.
Going past this season, I know it's a long way away, but could Urson be a guy for the future, or could the Flyers look at a different route at goaltender?
Well, I think a lot is going to be decided by how this last month and a half of the season goes and how he handles it if they get into the playoffs. But I think they have always seen Sam Urson as a guy that could be a dependable number one. They also have a couple of prospects coming up through the pipeline that they're very confident in. And, I think they're going to look at the goalie position as we're covered for now with Urson, what we have coming up through the pipeline, Koltsov and the kid they drafted last year, Zagarin, I think is his name. They're very confident in those guys at some point becoming a full-time number one NHL goalie, where I don't know if they're going to go out and spend, if Nashville puts UC Saros on the trade block, what it would take to bring in a UC Saros or any other goalie, a John Gibson out of Anaheim. I'm not sure they're going to be willing, certainly not this offseason, to spend what it would take to bring in a guy like that.
All right, let's look at some moves around the league. How were some moves? Obviously, Gensel going to Carolina is a big one for the Flyers, but what moves around the NHL affect the Flyers directly, and any other just big blockbuster moves that people should be aware of?
Well, I think what you saw with Pittsburgh and New Jersey, two of the teams that you thought would have been chasing the Flyers, they sort of have not run up the white flag, but they don't look like they're going to be contenders now. Pittsburgh trading Jake Gensel to Carolina, New Jersey trading Tyler Toffoli to Winnipeg. I think you can take those teams out of the equation. It's interesting. The Islanders are right there with the Flyers. They really weren't able to add anything, so they're going to go with their group, and that's going to be interesting to see down the stretch here, how that race shakes out, because that really seems to be, it feels like you've got 9 teams for 8 spots at this point, with the Flyers and the Islanders really fighting it out for that last spot in the Metropolitan Division. I think it's going to be interesting to watch how those teams sort of go through the rest of the season here. The Islanders are out in California right now. They've got, they beat San Jose the other night. They're still going to have to go through Anaheim and Los Angeles before they come home. The Flyers have a very difficult schedule. Talked about it before. They still have to play Florida again. They play Tampa tonight, and then they have to play them again. They still have to play Toronto twice. They have to play Boston twice. They still have to play the Rangers. So it's going to be a challenging time here for the Flyers, and a very interesting time for them to see if they're able to get across the finish line into a playoff spot.
Yeah, I just looked it up. The next time the Islanders and Flyers play is April 1st. So that's right at the end of the season. That could be the season for both of those teams. So looking forward to that game. Might hopefully meaning a lot for the Flyers. You've mentioned that tough schedule a lot, but I want to look right before that on that win the other day in Florida. A huge win you mentioned to gut out that 2-1 win in Florida. Could it fuel a run? Could it fuel this team to go on a little bit of a run here against 8 in their next 9? They're playing 8 playoff teams that are ahead of them. I mean, that win is so big. Could it fuel something with this team?
Well, you certainly hope so. You certainly hope you're able to grab some momentum off going into, the number one team in the league into their building and gutting out that kind of win. Now they got to play Tampa. They just beat Tampa not too long ago in Philadelphia. So there should be another level of confidence going in there. And then, then you come home, but it doesn't get a whole lot easier. Yeah, you play San Jose, but then you've got Toronto, then you've got Boston, then you've got Toronto again. Then you have to go to Carolina. So it's a rough stretch. And if they're going to take anything from that Florida win, it's that it wasn't their top-end guys that got them that victory. It wasn't Travis Konechny. It wasn't Owen Tippett. It wasn't Tyson Forrester. It was Garnet Hathaway. Maybe they're the least likely guy to score a game-winning goal in the last minute of regulation. But that gives them confidence that if one guy's not going, they've got a whole host of other guys that can chip in, that can provide something from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah, Garnet Hathaway. I'm a big Garnet Hathaway fan. I mean, it just seems to be all over the ice, and he's been really big for this team, and he came up huge the other night. So that next 9 for the Flyers looks like this. Lightning, Sharks, who are the lone non-playoff teams they're playing, and Flyers lost to the Sharks out in San Jose earlier this season, and that's what's fueled them. to go on this tear that they've been on since about November. Then they play the Maple Leafs, the Bruins, Maple Leafs again, Hurricanes, Bruins again, Panthers, and Rangers. That's their next 9. How are the Flyers going to get through this? Will they? And how could they look on the other side of this crazy stretch?
Well, they've done what they can put in their back pocket is they have done well against some of the better teams in the league. They've beaten Vancouver. They've beaten Edmonton. They've beaten Tampa. Now they've beaten Florida again. So they should have confidence that they can hang with these teams. They played the Rangers to a 2-1 game that, they probably should have won. Igor Shesterkin kind of stole that game for the Rangers. So they have confidence because they've seen it that they can hang with and win against the better teams in the league. So they understand what it takes, and I think this is a little bit of iron sharpening iron. If they can hang in these games and play these games and win some of these games, it's going to make them better for if they can get to the playoffs, because these are playoff-style games. These are games you're going to have to win in the postseason if you want to be successful. So get them now, get that experience, and it can only help them moving forward.
Yeah, bunch of huge games. We mentioned Urson, and he's been good against good teams this season. And do you think he can continue that good, how good he's been against these 9 playoff caliber teams?
Well, they're going to need him to be. They need him to be at that level. They're not in a position where they can afford to have we'll just give it our C+ effort tonight. We're still okay otherwise. They're not in that. And to be honest, this coach won't let them have that. So they need him to be on top of his game every night. And this sort of goes back to what we talked about earlier with the need for a backup goalie. It's hard to have that A+ game night after night after night after night, especially when you're playing these elite level teams. Having a backup that you could depend on maybe would ease that burden a little bit on Urson. But right now they're in a position where it's going to be Sam. He's going to play the majority of these next 9 games, and they're going to need him and Sandstrom when he plays to be at the top of their game if they're going to have any chance of winning these games.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough stretch and coming up. And when was the last time the Flyers had a stretch like this where they're fighting for their spot? I mean, are these the most important games since the playoffs a few years ago?
Well, for sure. It's been a rough go the last couple of years. You go back to 2019-20 before the pandemic started. They won 7 or 8 in a row right before things started. Right before things ended, and then they go into the bubble. They were the number 1 seed in the bubble, and then things completely went off the rails after that. Yes, they got to the second round, but they didn't look good doing it. They were eliminated by the New York Islanders. These games are the biggest they have played in quite a few years. Look, they haven't had a playoff game at home since 2018, and that there is a desperation amongst management, amongst the fan base to see playoff hockey back in Philadelphia. It's been way too long. And, these games are crucial if they're going to want to if they're going to, all the work they've done to get to this point, it would be a shame for it to slip away, even against this high level competition. But to get to this point and have these meaningful, important, crucial games at this time of year, these are the big moments. This is fun, but it's also very important. And they're very crucial, and they need to win these games if they want to get into the playoffs.
So someone requested me to ask you this question. It's about John Tortorella. I'll ask you exactly how it was sent to me. In your honest opinion, was Torts the correct choice in coach for this rebuild? With what we've seen from Chicago and San Jose, amongst others, was this culture-driven rebounding this culture-driven rebuilding philosophy the best option to create a perennial contender given our lack of high-end talent? So those are 2 questions for you.
Well, I think it's depending on the path you want to take. If you want to go the Chicago route, where it looks like, yes, they do have a generational superstar in Connor Bedard, but they don't have a lot of other things around him. They're on pace to have the number 1 pick again this year. So that's great if you want to be a team that is last in the standings for multiple years in a row. And there's no guarantee it's going to work. If you look at what Buffalo Sabres did a couple of years ago, they were determined to get that number 1 pick in the 2015 draft, and they basically tanked 2 seasons to get there. And they didn't get it. They got Jack Eichel, who was a really nice player, but again, there wasn't a lot around him, And now they had to tear it all down and build it up again. And you're looking at 12, soon to be, I believe, 13 seasons out of the playoffs. That's a path. That's a route you can go. The Pittsburgh Penguins did it before they got Sidney Crosby. They were a bad team for multiple years in a row. And you have to be incredibly lucky to get that generational superstar, a Crosby, a McDavid, a Bedard, and Austin Matthews. And again, there's no guarantee it's going to work. What the Flyers have done is call it a rebuild, call it a retool, but they brought in a coach who was going to, through force of will, get the players as they come in to become better players and to fit a culture and to fit a mindset and to play a certain way. Does it work for every player? No. And there's a long list of players who have not been able to survive being around John Tortorella. We talked about Ryan Johansson. He was one of them. Pierre-Luc Dubois was another one when he was in Columbus. There are guys who cannot play a John Tortorella style of hockey. Was he the right coach for this rebuild? That's a question I don't think that can be answered for another 3 or 4 years, because I don't think they're at that point yet. They're still, yes, they're a playoff team right now, but I think they're still in the early phases of building that talent base. And if you're not going to have the number one pick every year, you have to work really hard with your amateur scouting department, with your player development department, and find the right guys at wherever those draft picks are, that you have them. And you saw it with, taking a chance on Matvei Michkov. You don't know when he's going to get here. Maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 3 years, but you look down the line, they got Oliver Bonk, and there's some real hope that Bonk can be a huge piece of what they want to do. And it's why they redid their development department to, prioritize a different development path for these guys. And you're seeing the benefits of it already, whether it's Forrester and Brink now, Bonk and Denver Barkey, how they've developed along the lines there in London, and other draft picks from last year are moving along at a very solid pace where the Flyers are very happy with. So was Tortorella the right coach? I think there's a lot more to it than just bringing in the coach. It's the path they've chosen to go down, and we'll see 3 or 4 years from now if the decision was the right decision.
We've talked a little bit about management in there, and through this new era of Orange, can you just point out some differences that you have seen with the management and how much of a difference it has made to a successful run that the Flyers are going on this season?
Well, I think you look at the guys who are in the locker room right now. Kevin Hayes is an outstanding player. Ivan Provorov was a very good player for them. James Van Riemsdyk was a very good player for them. But when the time came to get them out, the Flyers did what they had to do to move them out. And they, in the Kevin Hayes case, they had to eat the salary and take a little bit less. Kevin Hayes is better than a 6th round pick, without a doubt. But it was important for them to move him out, so they were willing to take the hit right there, because they knew that taking those guys out of the equation would change the culture in the room, allow different guys to have different voices, louder voices in what that locker room would be like. And I don't think Country Club was the right atmosphere, but Danny Briere talked about it yesterday. He said, I thought we are too easy a team to play against. We need to be a little bit harder to play against. And some of that comes from John Tortorella's coaching style, and some of that comes from the players being willing to accept the way he wants them to play. And I think that's what you've seen from a management group that is united, and they're all on the same page. There's no, well, I think we should be here, and somebody else says we should be there. Everybody, they've got a plan, from Keith Jones through Danny Briere, through the coaching staff, through the development group, the pro scouting staff, the amateur scouting staff. This is what we're doing. This is the path we're on. These are the players we need. These are the kind of players we want to bring in. Now let's all do it and get it done. And that's where they are. And that's a little bit different than maybe what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, Keith Jones is on WIP. I don't remember if this was a couple weeks ago, a couple days ago, but he said on the radio that he was that they were telling everybody this is a rebuild and they're going to take this slow. And then he goes and says they told the players that everything they said was BS. What do you take from that?
I take from that people need to understand that Keith Jones was 1,000% joking around when he said that. He reverted back to Keith Jones, WIP broadcaster, and not Keith Jones, president of hockey operations for the Philadelphia Flyers. He tried making a joke. I think the people that know Keith Jones understood what he was saying, and the people who don't know him are the ones who got outraged over whatever perceived slight or however they took that. No, it was 100% a complete joke. He was trying to be funny. He was playing to the WIP audience. And I guess whether you can make your own assumption if the joke fell flat or not, but no, there was no seriousness behind that. They have told the players, they have been honest with the players all along. This is what we're doing. If we win this season, it's great. Our target to win the Stanley Cup is 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the line. What we're hoping now is you guys are part of the foundation that will get us there. And that's what they've told the fans. That's what they've told the players. Nothing has changed from that. This is just the early stages of what they're doing. Do they want to get in the playoffs? Yes. Danny was out. Danny talked about it before they went down to Florida. He said, yeah, we want to get in the playoffs. We've done the work these first 60 games. We want to get across the finish line. We're so close. Let's just do it. But they're not going to dismantle everything they've built for the future just to get in for this season. So they're on the path that they think will make them not just a one-time playoff team, a long-term, sustainable Stanley Cup contending team. That's going to take time, and that's a few years down the line. But no, what Keith Jones said, 100% a joke. No one should take that seriously.
That was the answer I was looking for. Thank you. And yeah, there's no I don't know how people were really taking that serious. I just wanted to get that from you. Some breaking news, not relating to hockey, but just came out with the Eagles. As we talked about Brandon Graham earlier in the show, and he is back. The Eagles and BGF agreed to terms on a 1-year deal. It will be his last season in the NFL. He will be on his farewell tour this year, so good for him, good for the Eagles. And I am out of things for the Flyers with you. Is there anything you want to talk about, anything that we think we missed?
No, I think if you're a Flyers fan, you should be very happy with not only where the season is and what's coming up starting, tonight in Tampa, but I think you look at the future. They've got 2 first-round picks in this year's, 2 second-round picks in this year's draft, 2 first-round picks in next year's draft. They're to continue adding talent, developing talent, and I think the future is very bright for them. If I'm a Flyers fan, I'm very excited about where the path is taking them towards. And people can get upset that John Tortorella isn't the right coach or whatever. The proof will be in the product. And right now they're a playoff team. And, the goal is to make that a long-term sustainable path. And I think they're moving in that direction.
All right. So there you go. If you're a Flyers fan, feel good. I'm feeling good. That's for sure. Adam, where can people find you on social media and NHL.com?
Well, all my stories are on NHL.com, as you said. You can find me on Twitter at NHLAdamK. I'm also on Threads, on Facebook, same thing. All my stories end up there. So if you don't find me on NHL.com, you can find me there. We also have a podcast related to the upcoming NHL draft, NHL draft class, available anywhere you like your podcast. So we've started the build to the draft coming up here at the end of June in Las Vegas. So, if you want to know who the Flyers could pick, or if you're a fan of a different team, I highly suggest you subscribe to NHL Draft Class. We have all the best scouts, all the best players on. We've had Artem Levshinov from Michigan State, the defenseman who's possibly a top 3, top 4 pick. We just had Jason Bukala, the expert from Sportsnet, the Sportsnet's draft expert, the former director of amateur scouting for the Florida Panthers. We had on Dan Marr, the director of NHL Central Scouting. We're going to have a few more players on. We had Tija Ginla, the son of Hockey Hall of Famer Jerome Ginla, on very recently. Got a few more players that we're going to talk to coming up. So definitely find NHL Draft Class anywhere you enjoy your podcasts. And if you want to see my stories, again, NHL.com is the best place to find them.
There you go. Adam, thank you so much for joining. It means a lot to me. And just thank you. It's good for us. And hopefully it was good for you as well.
Absolutely. Anytime, Ben.
All right, so that'll do it for us. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and listening or watching wherever you are. Make sure to go follow us on all social medias, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Threads, Instagram, wherever. And make sure to like and subscribe to us on YouTube, and go rate us on all podcast apps, wherever you are listening. That's going to do it from us. Adam, thank you again, and we'll see you next week. Go Sports. Go Philly Sports. Thank you for watching.
Swing and a drive, left field. It's deep. It's gone. Yes! And it is gone. Yes! Yes, he's got it. Here he comes. Way back to Megan as Bateman slams up. And the doctor made a sensational play. Fire in front, deflected, they score!